Today, the iconic 1952 western High Noon, directed by Fred Zinnemann and starring the all-time great actor Gary Cooper, is respected as a cinematic masterpiece and a film of great influence. The film won several Academy Awards, and in 1989, High Noon became one of the first 25 films in history to be selected by the Library of Congress into the newly anointed National Film Registry for its cultural, historical, and aesthetic significance. With the legacy High Noon has today, it may surprise you that for decades no one could agree on how to feel about the film and its overarching themes. While High Noon has been listed as a favorite among US presidents like Dwight Eisenhower and Bill Clinton, other prominent American figures such as John Wayne have denounced the film as anti-American and even communist propaganda. How could a film of such high renown have garnered such wildly different responses from the American people? With this video, I hope to shed some light on the subject and maybe help you, the viewer, come to your own conclusions. My name is Nick Grana, and I'm proud to present to you High Noon. What's it to you? For those of us who have not yet seen High Noon, allow me to give a slight summary of the film's story. In High Noon, Gary Cooper plays William Kane, a marshal in the western town of Hadleyville. He plans to leave with his new wife Amy and leave the town with a new marshal, who is set to arrive the next day. Just as he sets off, however, news arrives that the infamous criminal Frank Miller has been released from prison and is on his way back to Hadleyville. In years past, Miller was a very influential figure in Hadleyville, and the town itself was a bustling, if not incredibly dangerous place to live in. It was not until Kane put Miller away that the town became a place where families were safe and crime was low, even if businesses took a hit in the process. Kane, realizing that the town will be unprotected when Miller arrives, returns to Hadleyville, much to his wife's distress. When Kane arrives back in town, Amy gives Kane an ultimatum: leave the town to fend for itself or lose her hand in marriage. Kane resolves that he must stay to protect the town, and Amy makes good on her promise and leaves. With only an hour left until Frank Miller arrives on the High Noon train, Kane must find people willing to stand beside him in the oncoming fight against Miller. Over the course of the next hour, both in the film and in real time, Kane struggles to convince the townspeople to stand up alongside him and fight off Miller and his men. Despite being fearful of Miller's return, nearly every last citizen derives some form of an excuse as to why they can't or won't fight, or flat out tells Kane that they preferred the way things were when Miller was in town. In the end, Kane is left alone to fight against Miller and his lackeys. Against all odds and the beliefs of the townspeople, Kane manages to defeat Miller and his men with the help of his wife, she alone having gone through a last-minute change of heart. When the dust settles, Kane, surrounded by the townspeople who had turned their backs on him, throws his marshal star to the dirt and leaves Hadleyville for good. In an ideal capitalist society, everyone is free to make their own choices, unburdened by the restrictions of a higher institution such as a government or the state. A common criticism of capitalism, however, is that its encouragement of self-sustainment and a free market also promotes selfishness and greed. The idea that so long as your well-being is secured, the needs and safety of your fellow man are none of your concern. Now, I'm not here to discuss the merits of any economic or political systems, but it's important to keep these thoughts in mind when discussing where the belief that High Noon was anti-capitalist in nature may come from. With the way that Hadleyville's many citizens shy away from doing the right thing for their community and their fellow men out of a concern for their own selfish interests, the people of Hadleyville could easily be perceived as the product of a capitalist society. Between the film's writing, the fact that the film's screenplay writer, Carl Foreman, was a former member of the Communist Party, and the fact that all of this happened in the middle of the Second Red Scare, it's not particularly difficult to understand why many people simply wrote this film off as communistic schlock. If High Noon really was the anti-American tripe that people like John Wayne and others said it was, why do so many Americans, both then and now, including former presidents and the Library of Congress, continue to hold the film in such high regard? Furthermore, if the film was pro-communist in nature, why did the Soviet Union condemn the film for its, quote, glorification of the individual? I think the answer to those questions lies in the protagonist of the film, William Kane. While the people of Hadleyville could be seen as the average person under a system that promotes selfishness and greed, William Kane can be seen in many ways as the ideal American. Bill Clinton described Kane as the perfect metaphor for a person who is forced to go against the popular opinion in order to do what is right. Ronald Reagan praised Kane's character as having a strong duty and commitment to the law. While the people of Hadleyville ignored the needs and safety of their fellow people due to their own selfish interests, William Kane actively goes against the will of the masses in order to bravely stand up for what he knows to be right. With this perspective in mind, one can easily understand why many Americans, who surely see some of William Kane in themselves, would revere High Noon. Conversely, it stands to reason that a communist society that in theory would place the will of the masses above all else would condemn the film for its protagonist. So what is it then? Is High Noon a cynical, anti-American take on the effects that capitalism has on people and their beliefs? Or is it a celebration of the sense of duty and individualism that so many Americans hold in high esteem even today? I think the answer you find will ultimately come down to your perspective and beliefs on humanity as a whole. Are people predisposed to selfish, cowardly behavior? Or can the average person, even someone like you or me, resolve to take a stand for their beliefs, even if it means standing against the wants of the majority? Films like High Noon that ask deep, philosophical questions such as this, and force the viewer to dig deep inside their hearts to find their answers, are few and far between, and that is why we must continue to hold on to them for future generations to experience.